We're back with Robert Galately and Andrew Roberts and David Horowitz, and we're going to be joined with Andrew and David here in just a second and bring it forward a little bit. But I want to spend a little time with Russia because we have 7 people from Russia, 2 from the Ukraine, 3 from Hungary, 1 from Hungary and 3 from Cuba. I want to spend some time with Russia and Ukraine. Let me go to Anna first. Anna, what is the experience of Russia? How long have you been here? From the former Soviet Union?
I've been living in the United States for 23 years now.
Okay. You remember growing up then in the Soviet Union?
Growing up in Soviet Union, and my family was basically the part of Soviet refuseniks. It's the movement that were trying to move the Soviet Jews from Russia. And a lot of those people were incarcerated in prisons from early 1919 till basically 1988.
Yeah, but
so
prisons are nice. I mean, Americans seen prisons before. You have television, and it's...
Yeah, well, a lot of those people, fortunately, my family wasn't, but a lot of people, a lot of our friends were in prisons during these years, and
they weren't American-style prisons, is what I...
They were not. They were Gulag prisons, basically.
Let me go to Vladimir. You have been in this country for how long?
For 22 years.
22 years. Yes. You remember growing up in the Soviet Union?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's not just growing as a regular Soviet citizen, but the one who was a non-conformist, so to speak, with different ideas. And I remember the day when, in 1984, I got in Russian. My English was kind of rusty at that time. When I got a book, Orlov's book, 1984, in Russian translation, and I was reading 1984, being in Russia in 1984.
Wow. Wow. And there were books that you could not read, and if you were found with books in the Soviet Union, is that correct? Will anybody verify that?
Gulag. That's where we end up. Gulag.
Gulag.
Yes.
Right. Just for reading a book. Alexandria, you down here, if you will, Alexandria, you know about having books or not being able to...
What we have were passing family by family Xerox of the books, and if you're taking it for a night to read, you know, if you get caught, you're going to jail.
What is that like to live in the...
It's Solzhenitsyn. We were reading Solzhenitsyn only like this.
What does that feel like to...
It was exciting. I was young.
Mikhail, you've been here for how long?
33 years.
33 years. You sound like you were born here.
Right.
Your experience in the former Soviet Union?
Experience as far as reading books, we call something samizdat, which means somebody just typed the books, you know, and secretly reading, you know, like Solzhenitsyn books. Even you will be surprised if you want to hear the records of Frank Sinatra or Ella Fitzgerald or something like this. So you were considered like American spy. And God
if you listen to Frank Sinatra, you were an American spy.
Yeah, you have to music. Also, we have special things. You know, it's not regular records, but we also like a.
So how did you listen to? When you would listen to music, were you afraid? Did you turn it way down? I mean, Americans cannot relate to this at all. Wait, this is your wife next to you?
Yeah, this is my wife.
And what did you say?
I said that if you want to listen to Voice of America radio station, you have to do it in a room where nobody is around you and no neighbors hear you.
You know,
very, very careful, because neighbors listening, and if it's a little bit more loud, they're going to write it to KGB.
Did you?
Did
anybody was anybody asked to report on their friends or their family, or was anybody put in that situation? Vladimir?
Yeah, it happens to me because I used to befriend a lot of refuseniks. For instance, I lived in Moscow and I used to go to the synagogue a lot of times. I was the organizer of kind of Jewish singles in Russia. I was followed by KGB. I had my grandparents who immigrated for Israel. And at some point, it lasted only for as long, and that's the comment I wanted to make, is that all of us who are here relatively young. So you had to do something to be sent to Gulag or to be punished by the KGB. But back then, in Stalin's times, to start with, you didn't have to do anything. In purges of 1936, 37, you'll get killed for nothing. You can be the staunch revolutionary or a communist. You'd still end up in Gulag, and tens of millions of people were.
Robert, I think it was in your book that I read, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's been a few years since I've read it, But isn't it in your book where it talks about how, you know, they took the farm, you know, everybody was like, yeah, revolution, let's take it from the man. And they were handing out the farms and the businesses to the workers, but they didn't know how to run the farms.
Well, this is the tragedy. I mean, the people, when people are feel they have a right to the land that they've worked for generations, it's really owned by the czar or the state.
Right.
And now suddenly they're in a state of revolution, and the communists, that's the first thing that Lenin promised. I mean, when he returned in April 1917, the first thing he did was to promise peasants that they would have the land.
Right.
And the peasants, then of course they wanted that land, but of course it's a dream that doesn't work too well, because
But didn't they, hang on, didn't they take, they took the land from the collective, from the people, and then from the people who worked it, et cetera, killed them because they were the farmers, killed them, gave the land, quote unquote, to the peasants, said work the land. When they didn't meet the food quotas, then they came back in. Wasn't Stalin, didn't he have to go back and say, hey, by the way, you're no longer the man? And they said, you can't take this away from me, right?
Well, now you've just summarized about 10 years of history there, but basically,
yeah.
And God knows how many lives.
Yeah.
But in any case, basically you're right. I mean, that Lenin gives them the land. They can't make it pay because of there's an inflation that's going crazy. They can make it pay. The productivity goes down. There are famines resulting, and the famines then, of course, they go after the best farmers often as well. These are the so-called kulaks that are killed or deported, and naturally enough, you have a horrible situation as a result. That therefore opens the door to call for collectivization.
Hey, let me go to who's from Ukraine. Ukraine. You should come on down. We should bring a chair down here, Mikhail. You're from the Ukraine.
From Odessa, right?
How amazed are you that Americans don't know anything about the famine? The one that Russians intentionally brought on. You amazed that most Americans don't know what that is?
Yeah, they don't know what it is. In fact, I was mentioning my 3 grandparents, you know. Basically, they were taking everything, all the belongings, and they live in small Jewish village we call shtetls, Jewish shtetls, and they just died, you know, from hunger in 1918. Before the collectivization, but after collectivization, probably was even more.
And the Ukraine, they went in intentionally and tried.
Well, I mean, this is debated still whether it was intentional or not, but basically it's still called a terror famine. And you know, we've had now an awful lot of documents come out of the Soviet Union that they've now opened the documentation, and the more documents we get, I will just say this: the more documents we get, the more convinced I am that this was a genocide.
Yeah,
people. We've
seen. I mean, I've shown video of it,
definitely,
where people are running to the fields to be able to try to get anything out of an ear of corn, and they're killed.
They made a law against stealing an ear of corn. It's this notorious law, and that's correct. What was in dispute and remains in dispute is that we don't have a smoking gun. We don't have an order from Stalin saying do this on purpose. You see, the Genocide Convention calls for intentionality. Now, what we can say is that by force of circumstantial evidence, there is now a case that is. Well, I would say there are very, very respectable historians now who are now making the argument.
And you were a very respectable historian until you appeared on this show, and now it's all shot to hell.
Well,
I want to now take it to today, and I want to take it over to England, where there are revolutionaries on the streets of England, and they're saying kind of the basic things that your parents and grandparents heard all around the world, and then also to a revolutionary who can recognize and decipher what people are really saying. The revolutionaries themselves, they're using a code language. We'll be back in just a second.